So today we're going to talk a little bit about security and privacy processes for nonprofits. There's all kinds of terrifying rules, regulation, and best practices, none of which I understand, but I should understand, which is why I'm delighted actually that we've got Ali Brown here to share those best practices. She's a consultant who helps basically build up businesses, and one of the ways you build up your business, of course, is you mitigate the risks that would destroy your business. So she's going to talk a little bit about how we can make sure that we are on safe ground as we grow our organizations. So with that, let me get out of the way. You can do a real introduction. Tell us like your life story, all the glamour, and we'll go from there. We'll start you off without the mic.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I'm a little bit afraid of it at the moment. But if that fails, we'll just take a 2-minute break and we'll solve the problem.
Sounds good.
All right, let me fire up some slides. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up. It's Ali. Woo!
Don't touch it.
I know. Oh, is there a way?
Yeah, go view.
Okay, view. I trust you.
Screen.
Thank you.
And off we go.
Awesome. Now I'm totally going to get it away because I don't know what's going on here. Okay, great. I hear you good. Lovely.
I'm going to have to use the voice that I use with my children. Yeah, I yell 95% of the time. I'm sure everybody that are parents here know about that. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. We're delighted that Eli invited us to give this chat for non-for-profits. As you know, privacy and security are the topics, I think, of the year. Since early 2017, every time I get up and I look at the news, there's something new, something interesting to hear about, from small things with McDonald's Canada and them breaching their prospective employee information, all the way to our friends at Equifax when they're giving away all this private information and not telling anybody about it, like just shoving it under the rug, hoping that it's going to disappear, and then telling people about it when there's no other option, and saying that it's not a big deal, and then 2 days later saying, well, it's actually a medium-sized deal, and then later it's like, well, it's actually a big deal, and just making mistake after mistake after mistake. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about security, but what I really want to focus on is privacy processes, because everybody, when you hear about these breaches, it's hackers and technology, and a lot of the times these breaches happen without having a computer around. It's purely human error. So how can we prevent people from making mistakes that are very preventable? And even if you make those mistakes, how do you recover from them without having huge impacts? So as Eli was saying, just a little bit of background. I started this company 3 years ago. The name of the company is Kirky Management Consulting. Kirky is the Greek goddess of transformation. I wanted something that was not like Brown and Associates, like that, but something that talked about transformation and how business can transform themselves to be better every day. So just like Nike is the Greek goddess of sports, well, Kirky is the Greek goddess of transformation. So that's how we came up with the name. I've been working with larger companies, mostly in the U.S., and one of the big areas that I've been focused on is privacy management. But with all the traveling happening around and going everywhere and having a young family, I decided that it was time to come back home and establish the business here and start building the business. So I have two team members here with me tonight. And basically what we're trying to do is create awareness and start helping companies to be more aware and more ready when it comes to privacy management. So we're going to cover a lot of material tonight. And please feel free to raise your hand, interrupt me if there's something that you want to know a little bit more about, or we want to get into debate about things. Well, maybe not too long. Oh,
Do I have to furiously take notes the whole time, or will the slides be available?
the slides are going to be available. Thank you, Eli. Yes, the slides are going to be available at the end of the session. We'll talk about. It's not just the slides. We have a few documents and a few tools that resources that are going to help you that are specifically for the non-for-profit sector. So I hope that you guys can use them in the future. So what I want to do tonight is, first of all, level set everyone on what privacy really is. So we're going to talk a little bit about key concepts, what privacy means, what we're going to be referencing, what are the different regulations that are around the world. The world has very different regulations, and we're at very different levels in Canada versus the US versus Europe. So we're going to talk a little bit what is out there in terms of regulations and in terms of what I'm not sure if there are lawyers in the audience, what they call directives versus regulations. And yeah, actually, one thing I mentioned at the beginning before we started, I said, I'm going to give my disclosure. I am not a lawyer. Don't take this as legal advice. We're really more focused on the day-to-day operations. We work along with lawyers. They take care of all the, legal language in contracts and in policies and all that, and we operationalize what needs to happen in the organization. So don't take my word that she said that legally we have to do this. Because I am not a lawyer. I have a lawyer here, and she's going to be mad at me if I say something that I'm not supposed to. We're going to talk again a little bit about Canada privacy regulations and what are the guiding principles that the offices of the Privacy Commissioner takes into account in order to set up a good privacy program. We're going to talk about privacy and security because everybody thinks it's the same thing. They're not really the same thing, but they always work hand in hand. So yeah, we're going to talk about security a little bit, especially cybersecurity, and how it works in the context of privacy management as a whole. Some examples of breaches specific to the non-for-profit world, because even in non-for-profit, we have some interesting stories. And then we're going to just stop and take a step back and say, well, why is this important? And why is this important for the non-for-profit world? And we're going to discuss a little bit what are the opportunities of doing this right in the non-for-profit world, especially when it's an industry where sometimes money is tight. We want to do a lot for a lot of people, and we have to be very careful and very smart about how we manage our resources, how we manage our people, how we manage our money, what is the best way to do this. We're going to talk a little bit about vulnerabilities and causes for incidents. What are the typical things that happen in the non-for-profit world, and what are the areas of risk that we should take into account? We're going to talk about impacts of a breach. What happens when you have a breach? What are the things that sometimes we don't think about? What I call privacy breaches in terms of risk management, I call them black swans. And a black swan is when something has a very low probability of happening, but if it happens, it can be catastrophic. Financial meltdown, 2008, anyone? There was a very low probability that the stars would align and things would happen the way they did, but when they did, the whole world went into chaos. Well, with privacy and with breaches, that's what happens. Perhaps your probability of these actually materializing is very low, but if it does materialize, sometimes businesses end up closing doors because the impacts are that severe. We're going to we're going to give you some pointers of what an effective privacy management program looks like, the things that you need to think about, and that you can take home and really say, yeah, we're doing this, or maybe we're not doing this, we should get ready to do it. And it's a checklist that we have, and we will make it available to all of you after tonight. And we're going to close with what is coming down the pipeline. There are things in the privacy world that are changing, especially in terms of regulations, rules in Canada, rules in Europe that are changing and that are going to affect everybody in such a hyper-connected world. What happens somewhere in another part of the world has an impact even here. So we're going to talk about those things. And then we're just going to close the loop on where do we go from here? What are the things that we need to think about, just like quick wins and things that we recommend you guys to do just to get you on the path of good privacy. All right. So again, just to level set in terms of terminology, we're going to be talking about personal information. Privacy is about personal information. And what is that? It's information that can make an individual identifiable. So sometimes your name alone, John Smith, there are thousands of John Smiths all over the place, so perhaps it's not going to make you identifiable, but a social insurance number, a bank account, your name along with your address and your phone number, or even your IP address, things that can point right back to you, that's what is considered personal information. And some pieces of personal information are more sensitive than others, but anything that brings it back to an individual is considered personal information, and that's what privacy is concerned with. And we're going to be talking about privacy in the sense of information privacy. So information privacy, according to the International Association of Privacy Professionals, is the right to have some control over how your private information is collected and how it's used by any third party. So I think one of the key concepts that you can take away from tonight is that you own your private information and you have all the right to ask organizations and hold them accountable about how and why they collect your information and how and why they're going to use it or even share it with somebody else. And you have the power to say, yes, I'm okay with this, I consent you to do that, or no, you cannot do that. So, taking a trip around the world, what are the different types of regulations in the world? Well, in Canada, we have strong regulations compared to the US. Compared to Europe, not so much, especially starting next year. We have privacy regulations at the federal level with PIPEDA. And then we have, at the provincial level, we have 3 provinces that have their own privacy legislation, which is British Columbia is one of those 3 provinces, Quebec, and Alberta. Alberta is the one that has the most strict privacy regulations, even more than the federal regulations. We also have regulations around the public sector. So from a federal level, the Privacy Act applies to the public sector. PIPEDA applies to private sector. And when I talk about private sector, it also includes not-for-profit. So any organization, and it's very interesting because it can get a little bit into a gray area, any organization that has commercial activity falls under the jurisdiction of PIPEDA if they're working across Canada, or under PIPA if they are in Quebec or Alberta. Maybe some of you are going to raise your hand and say, hey, Ali, but fundraising is not considered a commercial activity. Yes, that's not a commercial activity. There are other activities that not-for-profits and charities do, like sometimes they list donor lists, they rent donor lists, or they do lotteries, or they sell buttons, or they do all these kinds of things for fundraising that could be considered commercial activity. And also, if you think about the relationships that non-for-profits have with their different stakeholders, is still a good practice for non-for-profits to be aligned to privacy regulations to ensure that all this private data is safeguarded. There's regulations for health, for electronic health records. Specifically we have in In BC, in Alberta, and Quebec, we have e-health regulations, and in Ontario, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland, we have Personal Health Information Act, so deals with health information. And last but not least, is CASL. I'm not sure if any of you have ever heard about CASL. It's the anti-spam legislation that covers any kind of electronic marketing communications that you may have, either as a non-for-profit or as a for-profit. This legislation is also very restrictive. Before I founded the company, I used to work for Johnson & Johnson, and back in 2010, when they were putting all this together, they gathered opinions and feedback from bigger organizations, and J&J was one of those. When they came up with the first draft of what they wanted to do in terms of restricting anti-spam law, oh my gosh, it was scary. You basically couldn't send an email to anyone if you didn't have their consent, the promise of their firstborn child, their blood, and their DNA. Like, it was just absolutely restrictive. And so obviously they scaled down from there because everybody in the business community really didn't like all the restrictions that they had until in 2014 they released the final legislation. There's still a few restrictions in terms of how do you ask for consent to communicate with people for commercial purposes or for giving them marketing information, how you have to let them unsubscribe if you want to do so, and it has to be in a very easy way. And the CRTC, which is the body that is in charge of ensuring compliance with this legislation, they start for money, or they really want to ensure that everybody follows. But the fines have been pretty bad at the individual and at the company level. Even like one-person companies have been fined already, and they have had substantial fines from $10,000 to $100,000, which for an individual it can be pretty damaging. For companies, they can go up to $1 million fines. So it's very important that when you guys are working on email marketing and sending marketing messages to people, that you have everything in compliance with CASL. Otherwise, when they hear a complaint, or if they decide just to check it out and it's not in compliance, they can give you a big headache. So that's what's happening in Canada. In the US, they have certain regulations, but not that strict or that widespread. We have HIPAA, which is for health, the FCRA, which is for credit reporting, Equifax, I don't know about that. COPA, which is children's online protections. And then California has also legislation for online privacy. But that's about it. In the EU, currently they have the Data Protection Directive, which is not really legislation, it's just suggestions of how private information should be managed. That is changing to the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, that are coming into effect in May 2018. And those are regulations at the EU level, and they're going to be heavily these are regulations that are going to be reinforced across the board. And there are regulations for organizations that have a presence in or offices in Europe, even though they may have headquarters somewhere else, that they do business with people in Europe, or that they even monitor online behavior of European residents. So again, if somebody has an e-commerce site that they run from their basement, here in Vancouver, and it happens that people from Europe buy products from them, they're subject to this legislation, and again, it's going to be very strict. The fines are going to be considerable. The fines for any violation range from 20 million euros up to 4% of the company's gross revenue, whatever is higher. So basically, companies that don't comply with this, and they're fined that they're violating the regulations, some of them are going to close their doors because the fines are going to be so hefty that it's not going to be easy to do. And lastly, they have the e-privacy regulation. Again, right now they have directives, which is CASL, but just as a suggestion. And then we'll have regulations, which are going to be very similar to CASL as well. So from a Canadian perspective, what are the guiding principles when it comes to adhering to privacy principles? What the Privacy Commissioner of Canada is looking for when they knock on your door and say, I want to see if you are actually adhering to privacy principles. They're looking for these 10 things. The number one is collection limitation, meaning that if you're going to collect personal data, you have to have a good reason for what you're collecting, not just go, I want to know everything about you, and just use 2 or 3 of the data points that you're giving me. No, they want to know that you're collecting something with a reason and just limit to what you're actually needing in order to conduct business. Data quality, obviously that the data is accurate and that you have a good picture of what people are giving you and that you're ensuring that it's always updated. Purpose identification means that you're being transparent with people and you're telling them what you're using the data for. Use limitation. I am going to use it just for the purpose. I'm going to use your address just for the purpose of shipping you something. I'm not going to use it for anything else. Security safeguards, again, talking about IT security, physical security, that you're ensuring that this data is well safeguarded. Openness, that you're transparent with people when you're telling them why you're collecting information, how you're using it, who you're sharing it with, and how you're destroying it if you need to destroy it. Individual participation means that you can allow these people to come to you and ask you questions about how you are using their data, and that you have a responsibility to answer all their questions. Accountability, again, that you know that you are gathering this data and that you're safeguarding it accordingly and that you're taking it seriously. Consent, meaning that people are allowing you to use their data and that you have recorded somewhere that, yes, I asked for this data, they allowed me to use it, and this is that they allow me to use it. And last is challenging compliance, which means that if somebody comes to you with a complaint, you have an easy way for them to give you the complaint and to be funneled to the right individuals. So I know that this is the dry part of it, the boring legislative part of it, but just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Here I just wanted to depict what's the difference between privacy and security. And again, both are important and one is a part of the other. So privacy without security, you don't have privacy. But basically, the difference between the two of them is that privacy is a governance issue. It's across the organization, everybody is responsible for privacy, and it focuses on how you use the personal data of people, how you disclose it or share it with somebody else, and how you retain it, for how long you destroy it, how you destroy it, and when. And security is more the measures that you have to ensure that that data is safe. That is safe when it's being collected, that is safe when it's stored, and that is safe when it's transmitted. And I just love this little cartoon here because it really depicts the difference between one and the other. So when we're talking to clients, they will start talking about privacy. The first thing they tell me is, "Oh, we spend $1 million on firewalls and authentication tools and sniffers and all these things, and we hired KPMG to try to hack into our system, and our system is really strong." And what I tell them is like, that's great. It's great that you're doing that, but what's the point of having these golden gates and pay so much money for these golden gates if somebody's going to knock on them and one of your employees is going to go and open it and say, "Yes, hi," and let everybody in, right? So, and that's where we're trying to help people. So on this side, we have like all the data security, everything else, and then on this other side, we have Dave. I hope there's no Daves in the audience. It happened to me once. There was a Dave there who said, "No, I'm really careful with the data." So some examples of privacy breaches in the non-for-profit, and actually you can go. Again, Alberta is very strict, and Alberta is the only province that has mandatory breach notification. So if you have a breach and in the breach there's the data of any Alberta resident, you are obligated to call the privacy commissioner in Alberta and say we had a breach, and they do their investigation, and after that they put that information on their website, so you can go to the privacy office of Alberta, and they have a list of all the different breaches that have been that they have been notified about. So, and it was very interesting because we were searching for non-for-profit breaches, and most of them were in the U.S. We were able to find this one in Edmonton, and there could be two reasons. One is that you guys really do your job well. I'm happy about that. Or that people are not notifying it. They're just keeping it quiet. So the first one, it was a child care society in Edmonton, not too long ago, just in September. Somebody was carrying an emergency backpack that had first aid supplies, but also it had all the information of the children in the backpack, the parents, phone numbers, addresses, health information about the kids, everything, and they forgot the backpack in the playground, and the backpack was never found. So, as a parent, you know how it feels to have somebody taking that information. Nothing else has happened, I think, thankfully, but yeah, that was a breach that had to be notified. Alberta had to be notified. In the U.S., we had the Little Red Door that helps people with end-of-life care. And it was earlier this year, somebody opened an email, clicked on the link, it was ransomware. And $43,000 later, they had their information back. Ransomware has become very popular this year, and a lot are fooled by it. The YMCA of San Diego in the summer, somebody sent an Excel file with employee information and an unprotected email, and somebody caught it. Then the Legal Aid Society of Orange County also was an interesting one. They were making changes to their website, and somehow they made tax form information accessible to Google. So if you search for the Legal Aid Society of Orange County, Google will show you the website, and then on the detailed information of the website, it was Ali Brown, my social insurance number, my income, and how much I paid in taxes, and so for the world to see. And the interesting thing with Google is that they cache their search results. Yes. So when even if you call them and say, please take this down, it takes a couple of days for them to clear the cache. But even if they have already taken it out and you keep searching, the thing keeps showing. So it takes a few days for them to, now that there's such a humongous organization, again, the bureaucracy of things takes a few days for them to take it fully down. So those were some examples of what has happened in real life, and it's very important to really get into the mindset of, well, it's not going to happen to me. No, not really. It could happen to anyone, because anyone can have even a day that you're not 100%, and you open an email and you're not thinking, and you click on the thing, or sometimes some emails they look so legit that you just don't think about it, and you go through it, and they get you. or somebody calls you and they sound really legit and they tell you the right information and you end up giving them information about somebody else that they shouldn't. Or you can have an employee that had, an hour of not enough work, and they're like, why do I do what I do? Okay, let's check out who has given us money or who has used our services, which is also another privacy breach. You're not supposed to be looking at records of people if you don't have a legitimate reason to be in those records. So there's a lot of different things that can happen with technology or without technology. So, but why is it important for non-for-profits, let's say, versus any other industry? Well, non-for-profits interact with a lot of different stakeholders, and non-for-profits tend to collect a lot of information from different types of people. So you have donors, you have employees, you have volunteers, and you have the people that you help. And non-for-profits tend to collect information about all these individuals. So the level of collection that happen at non-for-profits is rather high. And the more private information that you collect, the higher your risk of losing this data or reading this data at any point in time. Non-for-profits, because of the nature of the business, they tend to collect sensitive information. There's a lot of health information involved, obviously financial information to donors. You get a lot of, again, financial health, different, with their immigration status. There's certain non-for-profits that work with immigrants that you have a lot of personal and sensitive information that can get lost, and that can be very catastrophic for the people that are exposed. And again, when data is collected and is used, the risk of losing it is higher. So the more you collect, the higher your risk is. And at the end, I put here in all caps, most importantly, one thing that non-for-profits rely on is your brand identity. You want people to give to your cause. You really truly believe in that cause, and you really want people to believe in what you're doing. And people tend to do that. And people have a very strong emotional connection to a non-for-profit. If you really believe in their cause, you give money, you volunteer, you help. So it's very emotional. It's not just a business transaction. It's not just let's go to Amazon and buy something, but you're giving them $20 to make a difference. And that comes this emotional connection. So when there is an issue, when that non-for-profit that you have built this relationship with calls you and says, we lost your data and your credit card number is God knows where, it has shown that it hits people hard. And it has shown that people tend to be less forgiving of non-for-profits when their trust is breached than just a regular Amazon. Obviously, you don't say, oh, I don't care that Amazon disclosed my data. Obviously, that's a serious issue as well. But with a non-for-profit, after you have put so much trust in them, it's really hard for people to recover and for the non-for-profit to regain that trust. And once you don't have that trust and your reputation starts taking a hit, and especially nowadays with social media, with so much information going all over the place, your reputation can go from here to here in a nanosecond. And once your reputation is gone, it's going to be really difficult to recover from that. So that's why it's so important in the non-for-profit world to be so careful and so responsible when it comes to personal information. So what are the advantages? I know that it's a dry topic and it's a kind of like a to-do list. And do I need to do this? Yeah, just like with financials, do I need to follow GAAP principles and do I need to do? Unfortunately, yes. But from a privacy perspective, again, brand identity and reputation for a non-for-profit, it's everything. If you have a good reputation, if you have good brand recognition and people really believe in what you're doing, you're going to have that support to keep growing that non-for-profit and to keep growing your cause the way that you want it to. and that is going to really translate into different funding initiatives, client satisfaction, both from a donor and a volunteer perspective to an employee and a customer perspective, if you're doing the right things. When you have a partnership with your different stakeholders, again, donors, volunteers, employees, customers, if it's a trusted relationship and they see that you have proactive risk management and you're showing them, look, I know I have all this data about all of you guys. This is what I'm doing with it, and I'm making sure that it's secure at all times. Again, it builds this level of trust that they are always going to be with you. And just the same way that they can take your reputation down, they can bring it up and they can build it for you. And yeah, as we have been saying, compliant use of personal information improves your customer experience. You have better services. You have all this data. You're using it correctly. You have a good privacy framework. Well, then you can use it, analyze it, and see what are the best ways that we can serve our community. Do we have new ways of doing funding strategy? Can we provide better services for our customers? Can we help our volunteers do their job better? So it's all interconnected. Again, you really require personal information to run your not-for-profit. You do it in the right way. You use the data to make your business better, and it becomes this virtuous circle, right? Where there's trust, where you're using it for their own benefit, and they're happy to share that data with you. Okay, so if we start talking about what are the areas of vulnerability, specifically for the non-for-profit, again, as we said, you guys collect donations and credit card information. It's a lot of financial information that is very sensitive, especially nowadays with identity management, with identity theft. If credit card numbers are floating around, it can be very detrimental for people. Another area of vulnerability is how you store this data, how you transfer it, how you share it with people. Again, I know that some not-for-profits are very small operations. There are not enough resources, and it's could you please email me that list just really quickly, or you print it out and you forget it on the printer and somebody else takes it. There's a lot of points of failure along the way that can have an impact on you. The USB stick, right? Oh, I need to finish this job tonight, but I don't want to be in the office. I just put everything on the USB stick. I take it home, but then I forgot my backpack on the bus or somewhere, and all that information is there, not password protected, and it's very rich information that in the wrong hands could cause some trouble. How you disclose the personal information. Sometimes you work with other organizations, with third parties. Do you have the right safeguards in place? Do you know how they're using that data that you're sharing with them? Are you telling people that you are sharing their data with another organization, or even between departments? Are you telling them that you're going to use their organization for marketing purposes and you're sharing it with the marketing department? Or suddenly they're going to receive an email and be blindsided because, when did I give you my information? Why are you sending me an email about this new event or this new thing that you're offering me? And just overall, it's lack of awareness. Sometimes employees, especially in the not-for-profit world, volunteers, if they just come once or twice, they are not aware of the responsibilities that they have individually when it comes to private information. And you put them in charge of, again, we're at an event and people are going to come here and I'm going to take the names of everybody. Do they know that they are responsible for the data that they're collecting? If you have a breach, do people know what to do when they have a breach? I've been in places where, oh my God, there's a breach, what do we do? And everybody's running around like chickens with no heads, and you don't really know what to do. What's step number one? Remain calm. This too shall pass. But again, well, we saw it with Equifax, right? It was mistake after mistake after mistake. Not just the breach itself, but how they managed it, and there's a complete case study of what not or never to do when there's a breach. And people don't know how to handle this and how to react fast to really keep the damage as low as possible. But all of this, again, it comes down to what? It comes down to human error. It always comes back to us humans. We do fantastic things, but we're still humans, and we still make really silly mistakes sometimes. So what are some of the different causes? I wanted to separate them into technology and human error, but at the end of the day, it's all human, right? We have, especially this year, we've had so many malicious attacks. We have viruses, ransomware, phishing, other things called whaling, targeted to the individuals. I've had customers that basically suddenly the CFO gets an email from the CEO saying, "Oh, please, you have to deposit this amount to this account by tomorrow immediately." And the CFO is like, "Okay," and they go and do it, and the email was not from the CEO; it was from somebody else. Phishing, well, everybody knows about phishing. Just click on this link, and either malware is installed or ransomware is installed. And they just the old-fashioned lack of strong security practices, right? How many people have their passwords on the post-it note on their screen, right? It still happens. And then they put user ID such and such, password such and such. This is for XYZ system, and it's just there. Or somebody comes to you and is like, "Could you please give me your password because I just need to go into the system really quickly?" "Oh yeah, my password is ABC." All those things are really going to contribute eventually to having a breach. And then just human error. Again, in non-for-profits, limited internal resources, everybody is doing everything, and an error is just waiting to happen. Use of volunteers, again, people that are just coming and going, and we can lose track of who they are. Lack of awareness, and a social engineering, what I was talking about before, somebody calling, and they are very sophisticated. They call and they give you a lot of details that they make you believe that they're actually who they're saying they are, and somebody in your call center gives them the information that they want, and it's not them, it's for somebody else. So when we were talking before about the black swan and what are the impacts, well, again, we talked about already about erosion of your brand, reputational damage. Sometimes you cannot recover from those, or it takes a long time to get back to where you were. If you are in the middle of a breach and it's serious enough that word comes out, or you need to notify the authorities, during the investigation, your resources are drained because so much information is required from them, from trying to find root cause of what the problem was, what kind of measures you're going to put in place to resolve it, how you're going to ensure that it doesn't happen, then notifying regulating bodies, notifying the individuals. What are you going to do for them? For reparation, from reparation purposes. And sometimes it's going to cost you money. You have to involve lawyers. You have to pay people. Again, reparation, it could be rather expensive. And yeah, fines and lawsuits if somebody comes and starts a lawsuit on you because of this, it can become really expensive. So as I said before, perhaps the probability of the risk is low, but if it happens, it's really going to have a huge impact on the organization. So what is a privacy program? It's just a set of steps of the things that we need to think about to ensure that we are taking care of things. So number one thing is understand what regulations apply to you. I'm a BC non-for-profit. I just serve BC. Then you go to the regulations local here, PIPA. If you're across Canada, you go to PIPEDA, and if it's international, what kind of supply, and ensure that you understand well enough what those restrictions are and try to be compliant with them. Have a chief privacy officer. It's paramount to have somebody at the top level that believes that this is important. I'm sure they're not going to have like all once you have a privacy officer, all the resources and all the support be there, but at least you have somebody internally that has a certain level of understanding of what it entails. It really helps. And again, if in the case you have a breach and the authorities come and do an investigation, the first thing they're going to ask is your privacy officer. When somebody's asking about their data or how you use it, you're using it, they ask for the privacy officer. So it's very important to have somebody that is able to answer those questions, even at the high level. Just it could be somebody on the board volunteering. Anybody that has a basic level of understanding what privacy is. In a lot of organizations, the CFO is the privacy officer. Sometimes the general counsel is the privacy officer. Even the CIO, like technology people, end up being the privacy officer because they have that level of understanding of security, right? But yeah, for non-for-profits, that's something that somebody on the board, there's the privacy officer and help guide this concept. Yeah. Policies around privacy. If you notice, well, I do that's what I do every day, but every website that I go to, I always go to a privacy notice. And some privacy notices are pretty good. Some others, it's like, okay, you just copy from somewhere and you didn't even take out the instructions of where you copied. So it doesn't have to be this long, legal, boring document that you're going to get lost on. Actually, the authorities are going to start discouraging that because, again, in terms of the guiding principle of openness, they want just basic language, everyday language for people to know how you're using their data. So if you just, in your privacy policy, you tell them what data you are requesting from them, what data you're collecting, how you're using it, whether you're sharing it with somebody or not. I think that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And basically what you're doing is saying, hey, I understand I'm taking this data and this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm committing to you that I'm going to do. But also internally have a policy for your employees and for your volunteers that says, hey, this is private data and this is how we're supposed to use it, which is in line with what we're saying on the website. So let's make sure that we are true. Privacy principles in mind when you have new fundraising ideas and you have new campaigns or things like that. Right from the beginning, when you're in ideation mode, are we collecting private information? Are we using private information? How is this going to impact? And sometimes you don't really need to collect that much private information and still achieve your objective. So, but if you do it right from the beginning, it's easier than at the end realizing, oh, we're doing this wrong. We have to start from scratch, right? It's very expensive to do it that way. So just keep it in mind all the time, especially with digital marketing and Castle. Make sure that those things are happening right from the beginning. Third-party contracts is very important to understand. If I have personal information that I'm sharing with you together to serve our customers or our donors, what are you committing yourself to me? Because at the end of the day, I collected the data. I'm still accountable for that data. So in your case, when you're doing all these services for non-for-profits, yeah, it's very important to have a clear understanding. Yeah, you're giving me that data. We're going to provide this service, and this is how we're going to safeguard this data, and this is how we're going to use it internally. And when we don't need it anymore, this is how we're going to. of it, right? Education and awareness. Educate employees, educate all your stakeholders on what their obligations are, have regular training. And it doesn't have to be, oh my God, I have to do privacy training again. No, you can do it like trivia, you can do it like, okay, question of the week, and we're going to have a prize, and you send it out through email, and somebody responds, and the first 10 people that respond correctly are going to get loaded. Yeah, just try. I know I am a privacy. I like it, but I know that a lot of people don't. So yeah, we tend to be a little bit creative when it comes to trying to engage. Engaging, but it's really fun when you understand it. Again, talking about complaints or questions from people, ensure that they are funneled to the privacy officer so that they are the face of the company and they can answer those basic questions. Have an FAQ if you need on your website for know what you're doing with your data. Incident management, again, it's very important to have at a high level. If this happens, what are we going to do? Who do we need to tell? Who needs to be part of this group, core group that needs to do something about this breach instead of in the moment just running around and knowing what to do. Just have like a one-pager that says, we're having a breach, yes, let's call IT, let's call legal, let's call PR and marketing, get them all together. We're going to determine where the issue started. We're going to try to determine how to fix it, and we're going to let authorities know if this is serious enough that it could pose a risk to the individual. Then let the authorities know, let people know what we need to do something, certain reparation or do something for them. And you have your checklist. So once you do at least a plan of action, you feel much better once you have a plan of action. And just review it periodically. Review your practices periodically. Because again, you have new processes, you have new campaigns, you have new things happening every day. You collect the data differently. So do we need to adjust? Do we need to make any changes that we're still compliant? Cybersecurity coverage. That's the new thing in the insurance world. Now, a lot of insurance companies are offering cybersecurity insurance in case you get that pesky ransomware on computer. So they and they also offer what was it? Incident coaching. Yeah, sometimes as part, when you have your home insurance and your house burns down, somebody comes and helps you with all the steps. Here, insurance companies are doing the same. They bring a coach and they help you with your incident management as well. And ensure that all the personal information, where the personal information is. It's not scattered all over the place. And include some security measures. So what kind of security measures do we need to include? Encryption. Encryption is the name of the game. Either at rest and on transit when you're sending emails with personal information, very important for that data to be encrypted. Social insurance numbers, credit card information, health information, you're storing it in a database, try to encrypt it. It's much better. Access and password management, no. Tell people that post-its for this purpose are no good. Laptops should be locked up when people go to the bathroom. Things like that. Change your passwords, every 3 months. Yeah, I know it's a pain, but it's worth it. And give access to people for the right reasons, and do not share login information with anyone. Backups, always back up the data. Again, with ransomware, sometimes they just lock up your main database, but if you have a backup, you can still continue running. Antivirus and firewalls, don't get me wrong. Even before I said, yeah, you can have all this and still have a breach. Yeah, but it's better to have at least golden gates, and also train your people to open to anyone. But if you don't have any gates, you're not going to have all your employees holding hands, not allowing anybody in. Internet, instant messaging, email controls, not just open for everyone. Have Wi-Fi protected, encrypted ideally, access to the internet, limiting that access in the office. Those are all the areas where things where the threats can come in. Software updates. Oh my gosh. Unfortunately, it can get annoying, especially with Microsoft, with Office. Every week you get an email. Oh, you need to update your Office suite, and you are in the middle of something, and you're like, oh, I need to do this right now, and you put it off for next week, and then for next week, and guess what? That had like a critical patch that you didn't install it, and now some new virus got into your email. Always have regular software updates. They send all those patches for a reason, because they're constantly checking what are the vulnerabilities. And I know it's annoying. They are not doing it to annoy you, even. But just do it, because it's just good practice, especially with commercial software and mobile device management. Now we are at a time where bring your own device everywhere. Well, if your policy is going to be to allow people to bring their own devices and work from their own devices, put practices in place to ensure that those devices have an antivirus, that are updated with their patches, and that they're using the software that the company is. So those are just like some key pointers in terms of IT security that you can put in place in order to make sure that the data is not going to be breached or compromised. So what is changing in the in privacy? What is coming up? Well, as I mentioned before, Alberta is the only province that does mandatory breach notification, while at the federal level, now they're pushing to do the same. They wanted to do it by September, but government goes more than usual. I know that in September they did their last sharing of what the proposals are for comments. And it's a 30-day comment, so I think in October it was closed. And I am thinking that maybe this is going to be official in the new year. So starting the new year, from a federal level, if there's a breach, it's going to be mandatory to notify the authorities and the. It was very interesting because I think this year they had about 17 to 20 breaches that were that had notification. I don't think that there were only 20 this year in Canada, but it's because it's voluntary notification. Next year that it's going to be mandatory, the numbers are going to shoot up. And the big one that's going to take place next year is the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU. Again, organizations that have to deal with European residents are going to all be subject to these regulations, regardless of where they are located geographically. So that is a big one for a lot of organizations. Perhaps for small ones, it's not going to be that big, but for larger ones, and that they have a European presence, it's going to be a really, really big one. So that is what is coming. So just to close it off, I've been talking about all these things. Hope not scaring you too much. But what do we do with all this? We go from what for you from a non-for-profit perspective. What can you do? Well, I think what I suggest that you could start doing is really understanding in your organization what's your privacy. how much awareness in the organization there is around privacy. People understand the seriousness of this topic or not, and just assess what risk you have and what gaps you have, and if they're serious enough that you need to do something about them. And adopt some quick wins. Appoint a CPO, a privacy officer, somebody that is interested in this topic and that wants to learn a little bit more about it, and that can get immersed and provide guidance to the organization as a whole. Create or review your privacy policy to ensure that it's clear enough for everyone and that you're actually doing what the policy says, because sometimes I have read some really good policies, and when you go there and you actually see what people are doing, it has nothing to do with what the policy is. So just make sure that those two align. Training and awareness. Again, make it fun, make it engaging. Candy, chocolate, cakes. That always, I think food in general always gets engaged. IT security. Yeah. Again, you don't have to engage KPMG to hack into your system, but just basic things in terms of encryption and in terms of password management and access management. Who has access to what, for what reason, practice. Disclaimers in your e-newsletters. Again, Castle. Just make sure that at the end they have a one-click unsubscribe. If people don't want to receive it anymore, they can click there and unsubscribe, and actually they are unsubscribed. I've tried to unsubscribe from a couple, and I click unsubscribe, and next month I get the newsletter again, and I click unsubscribe, and they promise that I have been unsubscribed, and I keep getting them again and again. And I don't care, but there are people that do care, and then they call the CRTC, and then the CRTC gets involved, and they make their numbers for the month. Incident response. This is one that I always keep telling people. Incident response procedure. Just a simple one-pager. At least know who to call, what areas need to be involved right from the get-go, and create a plan. And that gets you on the right track. And bring experts when required. If you need an audit, if you need somebody to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, always ask for help. I was actually reading in terms of non-for-profits. You actually can get grants or volunteers, as you were mentioning, as part of the board, somebody with the knowledge around privacy to help you out setting all the privacy programs in place as part of being part of the board or being part of the volunteer program. So there's a lot of things that you can do. So I'm going to stop here. Before I get into the different resources that we have here that I want to make available to you, but just wanted to ask if anybody has any questions so far, or have any comments, any experiences that you want to share, or why you think it's important.
Have you ever?
How do you prove?
But if you claim that you've deleted.
Yeah. To prove to the individual or to the authorities?
Either.
Well, to the authorities, they can come and do some forensic, investigation on your systems if you have systems. If you have paper only, well, yeah, it is your word, right? But it's not to prove that you have deleted it, but if in the future that data surfaces, even though you had already said that you deleted it and you didn't, then you're really going to get into trouble. Again, the privacy commissioner has the resources to come if there was an issue and do an audit, and they have forensic experts that can look and see if you actually deleted the data or not, right? Especially with IT systems. If it's paper, it's a little bit more difficult to prove. But again, if in the future that data comes up and it shows that you still had it, then it comes back to hurt you, yeah.
So I'm starting from scratch on this one. Are there organizations who've got great models that you would recommend I look at so I can be inspired and borrow some of their approach?
Oh, that's a really good question. Larger organizations. Larger organizations, obviously, because they have the most to lose, they tend to have more things in terms of a framework. I'm qualifying this answer because at the same time, with larger organizations, they become so large that they just lose track of what they're doing and they end up making really silly mistakes. And you're like, oh my God, you're a big bang and you did what? No, you didn't. Organizations like J&J, they're so big and you have all the processes and procedures in place, yet it takes one error to lose yourself. This is a topic that is actually fairly new and it's starting to gain awareness. So, no, unfortunately, I don't have an organization that I can say, go here and look at what they're doing. Because everybody is work in progress. Everybody's just starting to find their way around this and how to do this better. Yeah.
Description of privacy. Regarding
Any information that ties you back to an individual, it's private information, it's personal information. There are different degrees of the sensitivity of personal information. Yeah, name and address may come back to you, and yeah, you don't want people to know where you live, but it's not going to be as serious as somebody knowing your social. Definitely, like if you had to choose what information you're going to share with the world, I'd rather share my address than share my social insurance number. So it's varying degrees, and then you involve lawyers, and they will say always, well, it depends the context, and yeah, in some cases, address may be something that is very sensitive, right? But in general, it's not as sensitive as a social number. So it's just in your organization and for the purposes of your objective, what are the things that you consider that are sensitive, and just focus on those and ensure that you safeguard those. Anything that you consider that it's going to pose a risk to the individual, really look into that and focus on that.
For marketing, the opt-out, the option to unsubscribe, only regularly opt-in. So I have to actually, hey, you're actually subscribing, and I'm actually.
Correct. Yeah. Whenever you have a newsletter or anything that you want people to subscribe to, you have to be upfront and you have to disclose what the purpose of collecting their email is for. And you have to say, I am collecting your email, and as part of the collection email, I'm going to send you news, and I'm going to send you marketing information or whatever you're going to send. And you have to have what is called consent. So explicit opt-in. Sometimes I see some websites and the check mark is already. That's not explicit consent. You have to leave it blank for the individual to read your decision. Yes, I mean, click, give you your email. Sometimes if you don't want to put, but you say by clicking on sign up, you agree that we're going to send you not just sign up for our newsletter, your newsletter and subscribe, right? You be a little explicit about what you're doing and have it say yes. And more importantly, what you're looking for is proof of that. Make sure that once you to get it, you have records. Ale Brown on November 7th opted into my newsletter. And when you send that email, and also as part of your say, you can unsubscribe at any time that you
This part of the or North American or GDPR.
it's part of Canadian. And it's part of but right now half of it.
So, oh, last my file grass. Oh, it doesn't bother me. Have to job.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
Which
why
means any
absolutely. Yeah, and that's the context, right? Yeah, absolutely. All right. So yeah, we prepared a few things. I hope these hyperlinks work. So this is a really good one from a website called Charity Central, and it's a privacy policy checklist. So it's a very good checklist for non-for-profits that first of all explains what PIPEDA is, the different provincial regulations, and then it gives you a checklist of what to include in your privacy policy. And I thought it was just genius. It's really, really good. So here you identify the different items and you decide if it's included or if it's needed or if it's both in your privacy policy. And it gets you through all the different items that you should include in terms of use, disclosure, collection, how you use it for marketing or fundraising, how accurate is the data, how you ensure that it's the integrity of the data is there, security, all these different areas. So this is something that I want to make available to you. Then there's privacy and data concerns for nonprofits from a company called TechSoup.
Who are they?
I really don't know who those people are, but this was a really good article about how you can secure all your data, where the danger zones are, what do you have to do when a breach occurs. So basically, in summary, what we discussed tonight. This one was a really good one, but somehow the website that I took it from kind of disappeared. So before it did, I actually printed it out as a PDF. So yeah, we'll give it to you as well, minimizing the risk of a data breach in non-for-profits. So it also has really, really good pointers about how to manage your risk in terms of data breaches. And also we have from ourselves, where is it? We put together this questionnaire for our customers when you're determining your privacy level of risk. So we have these 19 questions, and we ask people like personal information, what type of information do you collect, how many records do you have, and based on that, it determines what your level of risk is, if you are a high risk or if you're a low risk in your operations when it comes to personal information. So we want to share that with you guys as well, just to get a sense of what are the things that you need to think about. It rates the different ones and it rates the risk, and then it gives you at the end, yeah, like here you put whatever information, let's say health. I'm not even. Yeah, and then it just tells you like what priorities, priority 1, 2, or 3, and so that you can determine where your areas of risk are. And the privacy program checklist that we went through as well, we have it. So just a few resources for you to think about. And I don't know what I did here. Something happened. Yeah, so those resources for you to digest a little bit more of this information. And if you have any questions, by all means, I'll be happy to answer anything. You will have my contact information, and I'm happy to help and give pointers. And if there are things that you really want to discuss a little bit further, we're here always to help.